Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to TVP World's Presidential Election Night Special. Today, Poles all across the globe voted to choose the next president of Poland, and we're here to give you the exit poll results. Brought to you at 9 p.m. by my co-host, TVP World's chief political correspondent, Dahmen. But before that happens, I need to remind you that election silence is still in effect for another 10 minutes. And now let's connect live with our reporters who are in the election headquarters of both candidates. We have Kazimierz Łysiak at the Civic Coalition's election headquarters, and Sonia Agata-Biszczan is with Law and Justice Party. Good evening to both of you. We will be back with them later in the program once the exit polls are out. Let's continue. Polish citizens didn't just vote in Poland on Sunday. A record number of nearly 700,000 Poles diaspora and vacationers registered to vote abroad, 200,000 more than in the first round of the election. TVP World invited viewers to share photos and videos of themselves fulfilling their civic duty, and many responded. You can see some of those moments right now. Voting is taking place at 511 polling stations around the world. In the United States alone, elections were held in 57 districts across 23 states and the District of Columbia with over 60,000 registered voters, a record turnout, nearly one-third higher than in the first round. In Italy, 13 polling stations were opened with long lines forming from early morning. Joining me now is Alex Sumliński, who is going to show us what can still happen between now and August when the president-elect takes office, when Polish voters can file protests to challenge the results, and which government body is responsible for certifying the election. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Claudia, and good evening. So let's get straight to it. Now we're going to have a look at this slide right here. As you can see, according to the Polish constitution, the Polish president is chosen for a 5-year term. Now the post is largely a ceremonial one, but the president does have influence on defense as well as foreign policy. He can also veto legislation, meaning that he sends it back to the lower house of Parliament so that it can reconsider the bill one more time, but he can also send it to the Constitutional Tribunal, which will then state if indeed it is in accordance with the Constitution. Now, the president is also the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He also represents Poland on the international arena, as well as in contacts with organizations like NATO and the EU. And now we're going to have a look at a next slide. This one right here shows us, and like I said, the president is chosen for a 5-year term, and his term begins the moment he takes his oath of office in front of the National Assembly. Now, the National Assembly is a joint session of both houses of the Polish Parliament. Now, because the incumbent president, Andrzej Duda, took his oath on August 6th, 2020, the president-elect will take his oath of office no earlier than on August 6th, 2025. And now we're going to have a look at a next slide, which will still show us what can happen before August. Now, once the National Electoral Commission receives all of the voting results from the district voting stations, then it puts together a voting protocol, based on which it then passes a final election result. Now, the chairman of the National Electoral Commission has said that he hopes to have this done as early as of Monday morning. Now, after this, voters have 14 days to file an election protest to the Supreme Court of Poland, because the Supreme Court is the organ that states about the validity of the elections. Now, the Supreme Court has 30 days to do that after the passing of the final election result by the National Electoral Commission. And now the Supreme Court can deem an election invalid, but that hasn't happened in Poland yet. And serious irregularities that would have impacted the election would have to be met. For example, violation of electoral law, like for example fraud, or procedural errors like incorrect ballot papers, but also mass justified protests, that is, if the electoral protests were very numerous. Now, like I said, this still hasn't happened in Poland, but it did come close to that in 1995 when there was mass protests, well, these that were filed to the Supreme Court because the president-elect had given false information about his education. And now we're going to have a look at one more slide right here. Now, a Polish president can sit a maximum of 2 terms, and so far this has happened since 1990, and that is the date when Poland had its first democratic direct elections. Since that year, we have had 2 presidents who have sat 2 consecutive terms, and these are President Aleksander Kwaśniewski. Now, this is interesting because he won his 2nd term in the first round of voting, so no rerun was needed, and of course the incumbent president, Andrzej Duda. Now, like I said, as early as of Monday morning, the chairman of the National Electoral Commission has said he wants to have the results in. Thank you for watching, and now it's back to Klaudia.
Thank you so much, Alex, for that breakdown. And before the results of the exit polls are out, Aaron Dahmen looked into what powers are bestowed on the president of Poland and the importance of the president in Polish domestic affairs and the legislative system.
Poland's presidential palace will soon be home to a new resident. So what powers do they hold, and who has come before them? After battling against the communist regime, the country democratically elected its first free head of state, Lech Wałęsa, in 1990. Since then, the post has been held by 4 officials voted for by the people: Aleksander Kwaśniewski, Lech Kaczynski, Bronisław Komorowski and Andrzej Duda. And following the ratification of the 1997 Polish constitution, which is still in use today, the president was enshrined as part of the executive branch of government and as head of state. That affirmed the president's powers, which include being the commander-in-chief of the Polish armed forces, representing the country on the world stage through state visits, and formally appointing a prime minister following parliamentary elections. The role also holds a legislative hand, and while the president does not tend to formulate policy, they have the influence to sign bills into law or veto them, a decision that can only be overridden by a 3/5 majority vote in the Polish parliament. As part of their broader responsibilities, the president appoints judges to the Constitutional Tribunal and Supreme Court, can grant presidential pardons to convicts, and must give the green light to new ambassadors or military generals. And at times of crisis, they can declare martial law and states of emergency, but only with parliamentary approval and the signature of the Polish Prime Minister. They also lead the National Security Council, an advisory body on security matters. The power to impose martial law has not been used by a president since Poland broke out of the communist regime. In August, current President Andrzej Duda is set to leave his post after 2 5-year terms in office, opening the door for a new face at Poland's constitutional helm.
Why is it worth voting? Because it is our future. We always vote. That is how it should be.
Because it makes sense for everything we do, before and after. I wish us all the best. I fulfilled my civic duty.
Because we are Polish and this is our civic duty, our future depends on it. We take part in each election.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're back in the studio. This is it. We are finally approaching the moment we've all been waiting for. Months of presidential campaigns, many controversies that we've encountered on the way, and we're finally on the cusp of finding out who's going to be the next president of Poland. It's finally happening. The clock has struck 9, and we have the results of the exit poll of the runoff of the Polish presidential election. Dahmen is with me now and has the first official predictions. So, Aaron?
And then there was one. Yes, that's right. We can now reveal the first exit poll of the final runoff in Poland's presidential race. And according to these estimations, 50.3% Rafał Trzaskowski, Karol Nawrocki 49.7%. It is too close to call. We cannot make a projection tonight between centrist Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski and right-wing historian Karol Nawrocki. That means a waiting game. Will it be the pro-EU, pro-NATO government-backed Trzaskowski, who has led most major polls of the campaign? Or can the Eurosceptic Nawrocki, who's been imitating Donald Trump's rallying against the old world order, come out on top? We can also share how many polls voted today. According to Ipsos, 72.8% went to the ballot box. That's a record for a Polish presidential election. That's also more than 21 million people of the roughly 29 million eligible voters in Poland and abroad. Remember, Klaudia, these are not the final numbers. They are our projections. So watch this space as the night unfolds.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Definitely, this is going to be a very interesting night and a day to follow. As we just learned, the result is too close to call. Now it is time for us to move to our correspondents. Kazimierz Łysiak at the Civic Coalition's HQs and Sonia Gata-Biszczan with the Law and Justice Party. Again, good evening to you both. Kazimierz, let's start with you. So what is the mood like? And is there actually, were people surprised with this result that we've seen so far?
Good evening, guys. The results are in right now, and now we have Rafał Trzaskowski having his speech. So let's listen to what he has to say.
I told you that every vote will count, and first of all, I would like to thank all the Polish women and men for votes cast for me. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all who took part in this election. Thank you ever so much. Ladies and gentlemen, big thanks to my wife.
Kochani, ja jestem bliska zawału serca chyba już dzisiaj.
I think I'm going to have a heart attack today.
Myślę, że część z was również. Ja chciałam
Just
oczywiście
like many of
podziękować
you,
wszystkim bardzo.
I would like to
przede wszystkim
thank
oczywiście
you
kobietom.
all very much. I would like to thank all the women.
Jest w nas moc!
There is power in us.
Drodzy Państwo,
Ladies and gentlemen, let
że
me
podziękuję moim
thank
dzieciom,
my
Oli,
children,
Stasiowi, że podziękuję
Ola and Staś.
I wiem, kochani, ile was to kosztowało.
I know
Chciałem podziękować
how
swojemu
much
bratu, chciałem
it
podziękować
cost you. I
swojemu
would
teściowi,
like to
chciałem
thank
podziękować
my brother,
całej swojej
my
rodzinie.
father-in-law,
Bo bez
my
nich
whole
bym
family.
nie dał rady.
Without
Całuję
them,
was
I wouldn't make it.
z tego miejsca i dziękuję wam bardzo.
Thank you very much.
Chciałem bardzo podziękować
I would like to thank
Chciałem bardzo podziękować wszystkim swoim przyjaciołom, bo
all
bez
of
was
my
bym nie
friends.
był tym, kim
Without
jestem.
you, I wouldn't be
Chciałem
who I
bardzo
am.
serdecznie podziękować
I would like to
całemu mojemu
thank
sztabowi, z
my
Wiolą
whole
Paprocką na
team.
czele. Wiola,
Viola Paprocka, who was heading it.
So there you go. There are screams of happiness and of victory here. The members of the party of Rafał Trzaskowski, his supporters, are shouting here, "We have won. This is a victory." So they are definitely happy about the results, even though, let me remind you, that this result still could change, as this is only an exit poll. And, well, I've spoken here before with some of the members of the Civic Coalition and asked them how they are feeling. And they told me that, well, we are calm because there is nothing we can do, but this result will be razor thin, and it's definitely a razor thin. We still have to wait for the late exit, for the late polls to see what the outcome will be. But right now, everyone here is jubilant. Rafał Trzaskowski has thanked his wife, his children, and everyone who has voted for him. The speech is continuing here, but, well, we will see what the final result will be.
So much. That was Kazimierz Łysiak at the Civic Coalition's HQs. But now let's move to Sonia Gatabiszczan, who is with Law and Justice Party. Sonia, so tell us, is there some sort of a sense of defeat or not just yet?
Good evening, everyone. Well, the emotions are certainly running high at Nawrocki camp. Initially, although we saw a narrow lead by Trzaskowski, and indeed there was an initial reaction that wasn't so happy, but immediately afterwards the host said, "Oh, it's a tie. It's basically could be a statistical error," and indeed we are waiting for the final results to see who is in fact the president-elect. However, people here are already enthusiastic. This is something also that we heard from Karol Nawrocki. Karol Nawrocki formally was introduced to us as a, quote, civic candidate. However, what is more important to say is that he has a formal backing. He is the preferred candidate of the conservative opposition party, Law and Justice. So we are also seeing a lot of Law and Justice supporters here in the room. And perhaps we could go ahead and listen to Nawrocki and what he had to say about the situation.
Jeśli upokorzy się lud mój, nad którym zostało wezwane imię moje, i będą błagać, i będą szukać mego imienia,
If they will be looking for my name and they will turn away from the evil, I will forgive them and I will save them. Ladies and gentlemen,
tak, my zwyciężymy. Dzisiaj
yes, we will win. Tonight we will win. We will win, and we will save Poland. We will not let the authority of Donald Tusk come to a complete monopoly. We will not let an evil power take over public finances and take away our dreams and aspirations. This monopoly will not come to being. So tonight we have to win, and we know this will happen. These are peculiar elections, the only ones after 1989, and that's why I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart. To all the citizens of Poland, I want to say that we managed to do two things, at least, in the whole campaign for the last 6 months. First of all, we did not let them break us. They took away our money. They used the state institutions against us. They lied. They lied. They lied. And you were with me the whole time. We were together for 6 months of this strong fight for Poland. Huge appreciation for all of you. For all of you who put up banners, who paid funds into our account. Those of you who I met on the way, in the meetings across Poland, you are wonderful, and we are a strong, proud nation that loves our freedom, that will be never taken away from us. You are the best evidence of that. Thank you for being with me.
And so those were our reporters Kazimierz Łysiak with the Civic Coalition and Sonia Gatabiszczan with Law and Justice. So let's continue to discuss the latest results and what to make of them. My co-host and our chief political correspondent, Dahmen, is here with me by the table, and we're joined by Europe editor Marcin Zaborowski joining us here as well. Gentlemen, a lot has happened. A lot is yet to happen.
What a night this is shaping up to be. I mean, I've just had some numbers through from our number cruncher, Arthur Barry's. 129,000 is the projected number of votes that sits in between these two candidates. Marcin, we've covered this campaign for weeks, for months. It was expected to be tight, but this tight?
I think it was expected to be that tight, and it's still, let's make it clear, unpredictable. We still don't know whether these numbers are going to hold. The votes also from diaspora will be flowing in, and by tomorrow's morning the numbers may be different. So let's just make it clear to everyone that these are provisional numbers. This is a projection. This is exit poll. They may change. However, having said that, from what we heard from both camps, we heard from the camp of Rafał Trzaskowski is we have won. What we heard from the camp of Mr. Nawrocki is we will win. So that's small semantical difference, but there is a bit of a difference here.
Do you think that's overly optimistic on Karol Nawrocki's part?
No, I don't think so. I think the result could be different. Mm-hmm. When we see the diaspora vote, when we see not the projections, but the real numbers flowing in, they can still win. But for now, the mood is that Rafał Trzaskowski's people think that they probably have just managed to win, and Nawrocki's people think it's not going the right way. Yeah, mm-hmm. I think that one element which I would like to stress here, right from the outset, is that this is an unprecedented turnout. I think
a record for a Polish presidential election.
72.8%.
Yes, which is absolute record since 1989, and by considerable margin. It looks like that the electorate has been mobilized, and it, whether it goes this way or another way, is certainly a victory for democracy in Poland.
And it looks like both electorates have been mobilised. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about whether or not Trzaskowski would indeed be able to mobilise the centre and the left. He appears to have done that tonight. As you mentioned, Trzaskowski claiming victory there. Nawrocki saying, tonight we will win. Yes, a semantical difference. Nawrocki also, again, channelling that Trumpian tone. We will not allow an evil power. They lied. Is that reflective of both his campaign, but also the way that he would be in the presidential palace?
Well, he's kind of playing an underdog that has been discriminated by the system, that the establishment was against him. I mean, he's clearly playing on this anti-establishment versus the establishment rhetoric. And that's indeed very Trumpian. And that's, typical for the, kind of a political options which are saying that the system has been running against them. And that, so far, has proved quite a successful campaign line for many parties in Europe and in the United States.
So as we're looking at the results, we have 50.3% for Rafał Trzaskowski, 49.7% for Karol Nawrocki. It's too close to call. The difference is very small. What do you think this result, as of now, tells us about the Polish civil society?
Well, I think there are two things here. So number one, it is that, we already mentioned, the unprecedented turnout. Looks like the democracy in this country is healthy. That people are actually bothering to go and vote for election. I can even mention my mom, who is 91, and still wanted to vote. And she was absolutely determined that she needed to do that, yeah? And that was possible for her. And many people of her age.
And also people who actually decided to vote abroad, for example, vacationers, so people who left, they made sure, for example, among my group, they made sure that they're going to register and vote. Some of them actually decided that this is going to be this election where they want to cast their vote.
Well, there was also a record in terms of voters registered abroad, 700,000.
Yes.
In the US, we saw in the first round that Nawrocki well and truly won Washington, if you like, and in London, the UK, it was Czerwińska. Do you think that will shake down the same?
Well, I think indeed that certainly Nawrocki would continue to lead in New York and in Chicago. These are two, especially Chicago. In Chicago, he is winning big way, yeah? And that's the traditional diaspora from the, hailing from southeastern Poland. They are intensely conservative. They have always voted for conservatives in Poland, yeah? The other cities in the United States, like LA, for example, not so much. Washington, again, not so much. Yeah, they are more left-leaning. But overall, I think the United States will go to Nawrocki because it did so by considerable margin in the first round. London is a little bit difficult to say because Nawrocki did really badly in the first round of election in London. He came fourth. Being bypassed by two far-right candidates, Mr. Manson and Mr. Brown. But that doesn't mean that Rafał Trzaskowski will win squarely in London, where he won during the first round, because far-right may go and root for Nawrocki. So if you combine the votes of Nawrocki plus two far-right candidates, you have a draw.
So, what happens over the next 24 hours in terms of the voting, in terms of counting the votes coming from abroad? When can we certainly say we do have a new president of Poland?
I think by tomorrow late morning, and we will go through the thriller this night.
Oh, this is going to be a very long night for all of us.
Because certainly when official results will be coming in, Nawrocki will be leading. Because the official results usually come from southeast and eastern Poland, where Nawrocki has bigger following. Yeah? Then Warsaw, Gdańsk, Poznań, other kind of urban centers will be coming in, and Trzaskowski will be catching up. And then by 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, if Rafał Trzaskowski is about to win, it will only be around that time. Until about 4 or 5 o'clock, Nawrocki will be winning.
So a note of caution, not necessarily to take partial results over the coming hours.
Absolutely.
On face value. Foreign policy is a big difference between these two candidates. Karol Nawrocki, he's Eurosceptic, as we mentioned, he's Trumpian. He talks very much about his relationship with Donald Trump in Washington. He met Donald Trump a couple of weeks ago. Rafał Trzaskowski, far more pro-EU, pro-NATO, pro-Ukraine, which is obviously crucial for this region. Can you just spell out what these two candidates, what differences they have and what that means for the region?
So I want to mention here two things. Number one, the differences are vast. Number two, in real world, they don't really matter that much because presidential powers in foreign policy are limited. So even if Nawrocki becomes president, even if he wins this election, and he promised quite a radical departure from the foreign policy of current government, he wouldn't be able to do that. Because his powers are really, presidential powers are limited to ambassadorial appointments and to representing the country at some international forums. So what he can do, he can be blocking the appointments, which the current president Duda is doing. And he can go around the world and he can say that he disagrees with the government on Ukraine, on Europe, on the United States, on other things. Yeah, and people will be saying, yeah, well, that's interesting, but at the end of the day, he's not running the foreign policy. It's the government that is doing that.
I want to bring now into the studio Heather Grabier, former US Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Actually, I'm not. I'm a think tanker. I'm at Bruegel, the economics think tank in Brussels. I was formerly senior advisor to the enlargement commissioner in the Commission.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for noting that and correcting that. Let's talk about this result here in Poland tonight. It's too close to call, literally on a knife edge. What does this mean, this election results, but also these two candidates' different visions mean for Brussels?
It means a very great deal because although the president of Poland, as Marcin Nawrocki was just saying, does not have much in the way of formal powers in foreign policy, what he says is taken as part of the geopolitical orientation of the country. And of course, the president's role in unblocking things like ambassadorial appointments and also the reform of the judiciary to make it independent again in Poland. These are extremely important in Brussels. So this isn't just about geopolitics for Brussels. It's actually about having Polish state institutions functioning properly again, especially in ensuring the rule of law and therefore the even application of EU law, and making sure that there isn't state capture of what should be independent institutions in the country.
So obviously, considering this presidential election in Poland, the EU has been paying very close attention to the possible results of this election and the predictions that are going to be made based on exit polls. How do you think Poland's relationship is going to be continued and perhaps formulated anew depending on who is going to win this election?
Well, right now, Poland is at a high point in terms of influence in Europe. The government is just now concluding a very successful presidency of the Council of the EU. So Poland has been in chairing all of the meetings of all of the ministers over the past 6 months and has made enormous progress on areas like defense and also tricky issues about funding. So right now, the government is well regarded as having done a good job at that, and also at managing some tricky issues to do with the economy, as well as, of course, building up Poland's own defences against Russia and ensuring a strong eastern border of the European Union. So that's very good. If there were Nawrocki as president, then obviously that's going to make it much harder for the government to continue this work with regard to reforming within Poland. So it's going to make the job more difficult in terms of reinstating independence of the judiciary, ensuring rule of law, ensuring good use of EU funds, and so on. It doesn't affect the external orientation so much, but I think Trzaskowski win would give people more confidence that the government will function better because there won't be an ongoing battle with the president, which of course takes a lot of political attention and also blocks Poland's external representation. So I think having, for example, a very strong EU ambassador of Poland and also having strong ambassadors of Poland in key EU member states, those are very important, and that's where the president does have a role.
I do want to ask about Ukraine, of course, given its proximity to Poland and its role in the national discourse because of Russia's invasion just 3-4 years ago. How nervous do you feel like Kyiv is when they look at what's happening in Poland and the fact that Mr. Nawrocki and Mr. Czerwińska have very different perspectives when it comes to how they would accept Ukraine, not just as it is now, but, for example, an accession to NATO or the EU?
Well, there are short-term issues and long-term issues. In the short term, having a united government with a president who supports continued EU backing of Ukraine and building up of European defences against Russia, as well as ensuring that Ukraine can keep going on the battlefield, this would be very important, and that's where Czerwiński win would make a difference. I think the tricky thing now is that there really the Kremlin is looking for any sign of weakness in the European Union, where it's possible to divide the member states, to have more of a pro-Russian bloc among even a small number of member states. So we see that both Hungary and Slovakia have prime ministers who are openly endorsing Russian talking points about Ukraine. In the case of Hungary, blocking aid and support to Ukraine. In the case of Slovakia, the prime minister even going to Moscow for the May Day parade a few weeks ago. So having a president of Poland who is not clearly oriented towards Europe and to supporting Ukraine, that would really weaken the EU's position on that, because it would seem that the number of member states that are not fully committed is growing. There are also going to be elections in the Czech Republic shortly, which could bring Andrej Babiš back to power, which would increase the worries about having a more pro-Russian orientation among Central European Visegrad members of the EU. So from that point of view, it makes a difference, even if the formal powers of the president are not so great.
So we've taken off the checklist. We've spoken about both of these candidates when it comes to the relationship with the European Union. We spoke about Kyiv. Let's now take a look at the U.S. and Washington. How do you think that possible victory of one or the other candidates is going to shape this relationship with Washington, especially now that over the past few months we've been looking at the new administration of Donald Trump?
Well, in this election campaign, there have been endorsements of Nawrocki by what you might call MAGA members. So some members of the Trump administration and also some of the political affiliates of the administration. But this is not something that is very consistent. What we've seen over the past few months since the Trump administration took office is that they come in, they make statements about candidates in particular European countries, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those countries get different treatment. On tariffs, for example, all European countries are subjected to the same tariff by Washington, regardless of the orientation of their government and what Trump says about their leader. Similarly, on things like defense spending, Trump doesn't suggest that he's going to be keeping the American security umbrella or strategic enablers or other defense assets only for some member states and not others. He's treating all of Europe the same. And the many people in Europe who've claimed to be Trump whisperers, people who can speak directly to Trump and change his mind, have not managed to have very much effect on him. And in fact, people whom he previously was quite dismissive of, like Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission president, have had quite successful and productive phone calls and meetings with him recently. So this is still a very unpredictable president, and alliances in Europe are not something that he's building consistently with particular leaders or particular countries. There is a broad pattern, but it's not in terms of what he and members of the administration say, but it's not followed up by real policy consequences.
We've seen a massive turnout, 72.8% tonight. That's a record for a Polish presidential election. What does that tell us about democracy in this country, about the people and the people going out to vote?
Well, it's a very encouraging sign that despite quite a few years in which one party, PiS, tried to take over state institutions, so the judiciary, as discussed, but also putting pressure in the media, trying to take over other parts of the state, they did not succeed in state capture to the extent that it became very difficult to have democratic elections, which is the case in Hungary, for example, where elections have been judged by international observers to be free but not fair. In Poland, there are still free and fair elections. It's still possible for both a government and then a president to overturn the rule by a party that sought to capture parts of the state. So that's a very encouraging sign. It means that Poland has maintained a political opposition which was capable not only of winning a parliamentary election, but also regaining power and starting to reverse some of the capture of the judiciary. And it looks like potentially recapturing the presidency as well. That's really important because we see that in many countries, not just in Europe, but also in Turkey, certainly in Russia, in Egypt, and now also in the United States, there are leaders who are seeking to take over state institutions, seeking to take over the courts, seeking to take over parts of the media, and so on. And that is a style of politics, what you might call strongman politics, which is very dangerous for democracy. And Poland experienced it for quite a few years, but it did not succeed in Poland. And I think there are some important lessons to be learned from Poland's experience with that. Now, it's not that this is over yet. It's still extremely difficult to reverse, for example, packing the judiciary, retiring judges early, doing a range of things to try to change the court system. It's quite hard to undo that without resorting to the same kinds of methods. So the story is not over in Poland, but even so, it's a very encouraging sign that it's possible to have this kind of free and fair election now.
Heather Graby, Senior Fellow at Bruegel, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And joining us now, direct from Rafał Trzaskowski's HQ, is Kazimierz Wysiak, our correspondent on the ground. He is with a special guest. Kazimierz, take it away.
Hello guys, so I am here with Mr. Andrzej Halicki, an MEP from the European People's Party. Mr. Andrzej, can you tell us how are you feeling? Are you victorious today?
Very well. This is the first step, and I think that the late polls will be even better for Rafał. So I hope everything will be okay.
It's a very close result. Are you concerned that this may still change?
I think that it should be even better for Rafał in the night. So of course we have to wait for the final result, which will be announced tomorrow. But I hope that it will be the victory as it is now.
What would that mean for Poland if indeed this result stayed like that or got even better? Can we expect something to change?
This is very important for Poland, but I think it's also very important for the whole Europe and even whole democratic world. I think that see how many journalists are here also from abroad. Everyone was expected that this campaign and the result will be 50-50, very, very close. And this is the reason why all the eyes are focused on Warsaw, on Poland today. What does it mean? That pro-European center is winning. So at the first round, I think a lot of journalists, a lot of comments were surprised how big and strong are radical wings, especially from the right side, especially among young voters, those who are voting the first, second time.
But also pro-Ukraine, right? Not only pro-EU.
Yes, of course, but it is connected. So if the predictability is important, Rafał Trzaskowski is of course predictable. The competitor, first of all, unknown. Every day we heard a lot of new information. Sometimes there are scandals. But coming back to the point, I think that the importance of each vote, it is also the result of this campaign. And everybody knows that each vote is very important because the two camps are very close to themselves, still 50-50. The split is deep. We will have to also think how to attract these young people to the center pro-European forces.
Right, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to the celebrations. That was Andrzej Halicki, MEP from the European People's Party, and we'll let him get back to the celebrations. Meanwhile, back to you in the studio, guys.
Thank you so much. That was Kazimierz Wysiak at the Civic Coalition's party headquarters. And now it's time for your report.
Special report. I have been looking over the last week into what this election means for Poland and its role in Europe, and specifically taking a deep dive into both campaigns. This is the campaign of Rafał Trzaskowski. He's led most major polls of the presidential campaign, and centrist Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski has always kept the faith.
Mr. Trzaskowski, how are you feeling about the campaign?
I'm feeling great.
The government-backed candidate running on a platform of closer links with the EU and NATO, higher defence spending and in support of women's rights and abortion access.
It's high time for honesty to win. It's high time for integrity to win.
It's the same approach that Trzaskowski can be expected to take in the presidential palace, in line with current Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
He will be a sort of spokesman for Poland, and of course it doesn't mean that he will be subjected to Tusk in any ways, but they are basically from the same camp. They work together for a long time.
At the heart of this election has been a paralysing cohabitation between outgoing President Andrzej Duda, an ally of the right-wing opposition Law and Justice Party, and Tusk, who was elected in 2023 on progressive promises. Duda has repeatedly used the veto power of the presidency to stall the coalition government's proposed agenda, a deadlock that is finally set to break under Trzaskowski.
We have to finish all that we started in 2023. We need to complete the changes. We need to accelerate.
That means domestically, a possible cooling of the culture wars, with issues such as the liberalisation of abortion access, which Tusk campaigned on 2 years ago, set to be fast-tracked into law.
On the first day after the victory, I guarantee you a law that will abolish this medieval anti-abortion law.
Further afield, a standoff over ambassadors appointed by the ruling coalition can be resolved, as Trzaskowski, a former member of the European Parliament and ex-Polish Europe minister himself, pushes Poland deeper into a leadership role within the EU, while also accepting the continent's changing ties with Washington.
President Trump is someone who doesn't like those who come to kiss his ring. He values those who are strong and have influence, especially in Europe, because that's what Trump truly wants to achieve. He wants partners who will represent all of Europe and whom he will treat as equals.
South of Poland, Kyiv will know what to expect, with Trzaskowski holding the same Ukrainian position as Prime Minister Tusk.
I will convince President Trump that the end of the war in Ukraine must be one that the Ukrainians themselves agree to, and that it is in the interest of the United States, Poland and Europe that this war ends on terms that are acceptable to the Ukrainians, and that Putin cannot sell this as his success.
But it won't all be smooth sailing for Trzaskowski and Tusk's government. They face the tall task of winning over a large portion of the electorate who voted for the right, from rural Poland to traditional Catholics, and at the same time, they will no longer be able to put the blame for delayed reforms at the feet of the president.
I think we should hope that they can, as a government, sort of restart, like to start from anew, because they were really paralyzed. But they were also paralyzed not just because of lacking the president supporting them, but also because it's a coalition government, and we didn't have that many parties in the government, I think, in 25 years.
Trzaskowski is a multilingual, experienced politician who embodies the mainstream Western-oriented Poland and is now set to usher in a new era of the presidency. Less veto, more integration. After twice running for the top job, he'll be expected to drive his vision of Poland as a continental power and try bring the country along with him. Let's sum up those exit poll projections now. We're going to put them on your screen for you to have a look. Remember, it is too close to call. Projected turnout, 72.8%. 29 million Poles were eligible to vote. 72.8% is, by projections, roughly 21.5 million people. And here you can see the vote distribution from the candidates who failed to make it past the first round. You've got Sławomir Mencen. He's the far-right candidate who finished in third place with 15.4%. Grzegorz Braun, he was in fourth place with around 6%. And then you can see some of the candidates on the left. Marcin, I want to bring you in here because this shows you that Karol Nawrocki really picked up a big chunk of Sławomir Mencen's votes, and this was one of the most hotly contested number of votes across this second round. 88.1% Sławomir Mencen to Nawrocki, 11.9% to Trzaskowski. What do you make of that?
I think it's generally above the expectations. I think the Trzaskowski camp believed that they can make a bigger chink within the far-right vote. there was this conversation between Mencen and Rafał Trzaskowski about a week ago, which when Trzaskowski's people thought it went well for him, then they had beer with Mencen. So the expectation was that about 30% at least of Mencen voters would go for Rafał Trzaskowski. But I think in the last few days, Mencen made it very clear that his preference is for Nawrocki. And we see the consequence of that. Overall, looking at these numbers, I think that if it's confirmed that Rafał Trzaskowski won, it's the undecided and it's those who didn't go to vote in the first round. So it would suggest that the mobilization of the center-left and centrist voters is the factor which probably delivered him a victory, if a victory is confirmed.
For both of the candidates, mobilisation seems to be
definitely,
the
and
key.
this is something that we've seen both of these candidates fighting for over the remaining time before the run of the presidential election. But the more the merrier. So how about we bring in our next guest here? So with us now is Alex Szczerbiak, Professor of Politics at the University of Sussex. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on this very important and very busy night.
Good evening. It's my pleasure.
So let's start off by just simply asking, did you expect the results to look this way?
Yes, I did. I thought it was going to be too close to call. I mean, that's what all the opinion polls were projecting. I think that's very much the feeling that you got during the campaign. My gut, which is usually quite a good guide to these things, also said it would be too close to call. And even now, after we have the exit poll, it's still too close to call. It's within the margin of error. There's, from what I've heard, a substantial number of people who didn't, who refused to actually answer the exit pollsters, up to 4% I've heard. So all of that means that until we get the figures from the late poll, we're not going to be, we're still very, very unclear. It's really a draw, I think, with a slight edge for Mr. Trzaskowski. And even then, I think we might well have to wait until the final results are announced. And it sounds like they could be delayed as well.
Professor Szczerbiak, we've spoken a number of times over the last couple of weeks and months on this election campaign. Can you spell out again for us just why there is so much at stake for Poland in this election?
Yes, I mean, there's so much at stake because although the president isn't involved in the day-to-day running of the government, they have a couple of very powerful constitutional weapons that they can use. One of them is a veto, a legislative veto, which requires a 3/5 parliamentary majority to overturn, and the government doesn't have a 3/5 parliamentary majority. So if the president chooses to veto something, they can't get the law through. Another very powerful instrument is the ability to refer laws to the Constitutional Tribunal. And through what's called the preventive control mode, that means that those laws don't come into effect until the Constitutional Tribunal has considered them, which basically stops the law from coming into effect. And given that every member of the Constitutional Tribunal was appointed by parliaments dominated by Law and Justice, it's likely that those Constitutional Tribunal judgments, when they come, won't be in the government's favour. So apart from obviously the political dynamics that a victory for either of the candidates are going to set off, which is very, very important, because dynamics are very important in politics, this is the constitutional block that the president exercises on the government. And if it turns out that Mr. Nawrocki has won, then that will considerably hamstring the government's ability to get through its legislative programme through the remaining 2.5 years of its parliamentary term.
So if I'm correct, by the looks of it, over 55% of people who were undecided or did not go and vote in the first round of the presidential election mobilized and could potentially sway the pendulum in one way or the other. What was the deciding factor for these people during the runoff of the presidential election in Poland that they decided to actually go and vote?
Well, obviously, if the opinion poll is correct, and I think that does, even if it's out a little bit, it does suggest that among those people who didn't turn out and vote in the first round, among the new voters, a majority of them clearly seem to have broken for Mr. Trzaskowski. I think what's going on here is, I mean, the key question with this election was always going to be, is it a referendum on the current government? If it is, or if it was, Mr. Nawrocki would win because most people don't like the current government? Or is it, as Mr. Trzaskowski and Civic Platform have tried to turn it into, a referendum on the previous government? In other words, do they try and mobilise those people that they managed to get out to vote for the governing parties in October 2023 one more time to finish the job, if you like, and hoping that it's so close, it's still relatively close from that election, and that those memories will be fairly fresh. And I think what's happened here was that there was a number of voters who were quite disillusioned with the government and decided to come nonetheless to come out and vote in the second round. And I think further evidence of that is the vote for how Mr. Zandberg's voters split. I mean, Mr. Zandberg, remember, he's somebody who left the government and is very critical of it from a radical left perspective. So in a sense, people who voted for him voted against the government as well. But as your exit poll has shown, those people have overwhelmingly cut in favour of Rafał Trzaskowski. They've not really voted against the government at all. So I think that's what's happening here. I think that basically the reason it's so close is because the governing camp was able to try and recreate, and to some degree at least, possibly enough to win, appears to have succeeded, that mobilisation that they had in October 2023.
As you mentioned, Professor Szczerbiak, Karol Nawrocki is sniffing right behind Rafał Trzaskowski. So I took the liberty this week of taking a look into Karol Nawrocki's campaign. And this is the state of play. This is Poland's would-be president, a right-wing historian with a Hollywood smile. Mr. Nawrocki, do you believe you can still win the election?
Yes, still, I will.
Karol Nawrocki, handpicked from the political wilderness by the opposition Law and Justice Party.
This is the time to save Poland. This is the time to save Poland.
His campaign has imitated Donald Trump's rallying against the old world order, and it is this platform of national sovereignty and a deep scepticism of the European Union that could underpin a Nawrocki residency in the presidential palace.
It's really the guy who is a sort of accidental politician in many ways. I don't think even Law and Justice knows what he's going to do. And he is very far right, very anti-Ukrainian.
At the heart of this election has been a paralysing cohabitation between outgoing President Andrzej Duda, a Law and Justice ally, and Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Duda has repeatedly used the veto power of the presidency to stall the coalition government's proposed agenda, a pattern that will likely continue under Nawrocki.
I am the voice of all those whose cries do not reach Donald Tusk today, the voice of all those who do not want Polish schools to be ideologized, Polish agriculture to be destroyed, and our freedom to be taken away.
That means domestically, issues like the liberalisation of abortion access and women's rights, which Tusk and presidential challenger Rafał Trzaskowski have advocated for, are set to be put on the back burner by the socially conservative Nawrocki. Away from home, he's built his strongest ties with Washington, briefly meeting with President Donald Trump in May and getting the White House administration's endorsement in the week leading up to the final runoff.
I just had the opportunity to meet with Karol, and listen, he needs to be the next president of Poland. Do you understand me?
But there the schmoozing with the West ends. From Berlin to Brussels, Nawrocki is expected to rail against foreign influence and what he calls EU overreach, likely reigniting the confrontational tone used by the previous Law and Justice administration.
I support and will maintain relations with the European Union, but I will not allow Ursula von der Leyen to decide on matters that will be made by me as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces.
And on Ukraine, Nawrocki's tone has hardened, ruling out the war-torn country's accession to NATO, which ends a rare cross-party consensus on the issue, saying Poland will continue delivering support, but only after putting its own interests first.
I speak the language of Polish men and women. I speak the language of Poles who have their own agenda of issues, both in the West and in the East. And if President Zelensky treats us badly, we have the right to say it. And millions of Poles in Poland today would like to say it. but cannot because immediately there is the slogan that we're speaking Putin's propaganda.
Nawrocki has never previously had an electoral mandate, which makes his presidency a somewhat unknown prospect. But his words over recent months appear to paint a picture of a man set to double down on a protectionist fight for Polish identity, stonewall the ruling coalition, and curry favour with the White House over partners closer afield. I want to bring in Marcin now. Professor Czerwińska there talked about this being a referendum on the coalition government. What does this tell us, this too close to call verdict tonight, about how Polish people are feeling about this government?
I think it's quite right analysis. I mean, basically what happened, the current government was elected in October 2023 through very high turnout, around 75%, kind of close to the current turnout for this election. And then it couldn't carry out a part of its agenda because of a block from President Duda. And the parts of the agenda which the current government could not carry out were sort of progressive causes, things to do with like abortion rights, with the civil unions, with the some tax cuts for the younger voters and so on. So in consequence, I think that a lot of the younger voters, first-time voters, women, decided they lost interest in the government, and that's what you could see with the first round of this presidential election. And I think that probably, if this projection proved right, the Rafał Trzaskowski camp managed to remobilize these people and to tell them, let us finish what we started in October 2023. Yeah? And numbers are shockingly similar when you look into the turnout in October 2023 and now in today when it comes to turnout.
Rafał Trzaskowski, actually, I have a quote here from the campaign. We have to finish all that we started in 2023. We need to complete the changes. We need to accelerate. So this was exactly the message he was sending, and clearly it mobilised people.
It definitely did. I would like to go back to Professor Szczerbiak. So we are looking at two different candidates, too close to call, and we're looking at the relationship with one of Poland's closest partners, the United States. With the new administration, we've seen that President Trump actually supported and endorsed one of the candidates. If Rafał Trzaskowski were to win, how do you think this relationship is going to develop further? And where is Poland going to go in terms of this relationship with Washington?
I think that's very interesting. I think the first thing to say is that, if the election result is very, very close, it is likely to be challenged by one side or the other. And the closer it is, the more challenge that there is likely to be. And if Rafał Trzaskowski is to win by a very, very close margin, we're talking about tens of thousands, then supporters of the Nawrocki campaign could challenge that result. And you've got to remember is that there were members of the Republican Party, people within the Trump administration, you showed in your film, very close to the Nawrocki campaign, and actually made a complaint about the way that the government was behaving and allegedly in an undemocratic way, and specifically about particular use of Facebook and the social media by foreign-funded organisations to support Mr. Trzaskowski's campaign and to undermine his opponents, Mr. Nawrocki and Mr. Menson. And so, one scenario, and let's not rule this out, is that actually the Trump administration could question the election result because there's already some evidence that they feel that one side has been behaving wrongly during the campaign. So I think we shouldn't rule that possibility out. And let's not forget Mr. Trump himself has questioned the result of an election that he lost. I think more broadly, the interesting thing here will be how will the Tusk administration, how will it work within the European Union on the development of a separate European defence identity independently of NATO, because up until now, although I think this is the direction in which it would like to go, because the Tusk administration and Mr. Trzaskowski, as you said in your report, want to locate Poland very much within the EU political mainstream, work with the EU political establishment. They've had to be very careful about being seen to support the development of European security identity separately from NATO, separately from the transatlantic alliance, because most Poles, whatever they think of Mr. Trump, still see the United States as it's the country's main military security guarantor. I think it will be very interesting with 2.5 years to go until an election, whether now they actually start to engage with that much more seriously. Just one more thing on this. If Mr. Trzaskowski wins, then the ambassadorial appointment, Bogdan Klich, which is currently being blocked by President Duda, will obviously be approved. The reason that Andrzej Duda blocked Bogdan Klich's appointment is because he feels that he's somebody who's been very critical of the Trump administration. It's going to be very difficult for Poland to develop relations if he's the ambassador. So it will be very interesting to see what will happen if Mr. Klich becomes the ambassador, which obviously he will if Mr. Trzaskowski wins.
Much to keep an eye on. Alex Szczerbiak, Professor of Politics at the University of Sussex. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And now let's cross once more to our correspondents at the campaign headquarters, where emotions are definitely still running very high and are going to run high for some hours. So first up, we have Kazimierz Łysiak at the Civic Coalition's elections HQs. Kazimierz, so tell us, is there a sense of uncertainty creeping in, or Mr. Trzaskowski's team is certain of the win and it's just a matter of time?
Well, to be honest, the mood here is definitely one of victory, although there were some cautious statements here. I've asked the Polish Minister for European Affairs, Adam Szłapka, whether this is a victory. He said yes. But then I spoke with the member of the European Parliament, Andrzej Halicki, and he said that, well, this is a victory, but let's hold off for just a little while, because the result is razor thin. So it could still theoretically change. But many MPs here, ministers, were hugging each other, were smiling. They were saying this is a victory. They are definitely feeling that this is a victory, but we just have to wait and see whether that is actually the case in the end when the late polls arrive. I spoke with some of the members of the Civic Coalition here and asked them what this victory would mean for the future, and they all said the same thing. Finally, we can start working together with the president to get our reforms through, as the incumbent president Andrzej Duda has been blocking some of these major reforms like the judicial reform, so now they are eager to start working. That's also something that Rafał Trzaskowski has said in his speech. Now it is the time to start working. But that's all about from here. This is all coming to an end. The members of the Civic Coalition are slowly leaving the hall. So this is my summary from here, from the headquarters of Rafał Trzaskowski. Now back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you so much, Kazimierz Łysiak from the Civic Coalition's election headquarters. And now it's time to go to
Sonia Agata-Byszczan in just a moment, but we have to hand some numbers from the US. Karol Nawrocki, 66.65%. Rafał Trzaskowski, 43.35%. Those are the projections coming out of America, which is as to be expected. Karol Nawrocki was expected to win the US, Marcin.
This is something we discussed.
Totally to be expected. And actually, against many appearances, the United States diaspora is quite small when it comes to those who come and vote. We're talking about like 45, 50,000 people.
I'm very much looking forward to the election exit polls from London.
Yeah.
This is going to be an interesting one.
It will be fascinating. And let's go straight now to Sonia Agata-Byszczan. She is at the Law and Justice headquarters of Karol Nawrocki. And Sonia, Karol Nawrocki tonight saying we will win, despite being behind, although it is razor tight, it is within the margin of error. What's the feeling like on the ground?
Good evening, everyone. Indeed, despite the fact that we've seen Trzaskowski in the lead initially, here the atmosphere is quite optimistic. What is more, Jarosław Kaczyński, the co-founder of the Law and Justice Party, he said we already won. So this optimism is next level. Of course, we are waiting for the final results. And again, according to the polls that we have, this would not be the case. However, we have to wait further. The representatives of Law and Justice are saying that the reason that the results are not even better are due to the dirty media campaign. So let's just remind ourselves, Karol Nawrocki could be described as many things, among them historian, a Eurosceptic, opponent to migration. These are some of the descriptions. However, in the recent weeks, we've heard of a number of controversies, allegations of connection to gangsters, to prostitution, to apartment fraud, etc. What Nawrocki said with respect to that recently, he said that looking at President Donald Trump, even though he also had some dirty media campaigns working against him, this did not prevent his success, and he's expecting the same. So this is really the mood that we can also feel here at Nawrocki camp. Speaking of what Kazik was saying regarding the cooperation between Trzaskowski as president and cooperation as with Civic Coalition as the ruling government, well, here the case would be the opposite. Current president of Poland, Andrzej Duda, who is an ally of Law and Justice, he has been vetoing or threatening to veto the initiatives coming from the ruling Civic Coalition. And we could expect a similar trajectory coming from Karol Nawrocki should he become the president indeed. So a pathway that could go away from the European Union as opposed to more unity between Trzaskowski as president and Civic Coalition. But of course, we have to wait for the final results. Back to you.
Thank you so much. That was Sonia Agata Biszczan from the Law and Justice election headquarters. But while Poland was choosing its new president, other important events were taking place in Central and Eastern Europe region. And Alex Sumulinski has the latest headlines for us. Here is the latest on world news. Alex, the floor is yours.
Welcome back. I'm Alex Sumulinski, and these are latest updates in the world news. Russia and Ukraine are due to hold a new round of peace talks in Istanbul on Monday after Moscow came under pressure from U.S. President Donald Trump, calling Russian leader Vladimir Putin crazy. More tangible pressure was exerted in Moscow on the battlefield as Ukraine struck its strategic bombers at their bases. Oz Chatterjee from Kyiv has more.
Ukraine launched a coordinated series of drone attacks against major Russian air bases on Sunday in one of Ukraine's most audacious military operations of the war to date. The SBU, that's Ukraine's security services, are claiming credit for the attack, which they say destroyed up to 40 Russian planes, including many belonging to Russia's strategic bombing fleet. These are the nuclear-capable planes, part of Russia's strategic bombing fleet. Now, we are still waiting on visual confirmation for that number. However, there have been videos posted by the SBU showing these attacks on these planes. So at least some planes have been damaged. That's according to the Russians themselves, who admitted that these attacks took place and that certain planes were on fire following these attacks. Now, this is one of the most audacious attacks of the war to date. The Ukrainians used shipping containers and these short-distance drones that were launched from these shipping containers thousands of kilometers deep into Russian territory. So this was an operation that took many, many months of planning to undertake, and this takes place one day before the Ukrainians and the Russians are due to meet in Istanbul for further talks. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that Rustem Umerov, Ukraine's defense minister, would be heading the delegation being sent to Istanbul for talks with the Russians. Still no clarity on what the Russian delegation will look like on Monday. However, Russia also escalated on Sunday, launching an overnight series of drone attacks across Ukraine, the largest Russian attack of the war to date, launching 472 drones, a record number of Russian drones on Ukrainian territory. Now, this beats the Russian record, which was only set a week ago by more than 100 drones. So Russia's really stepping up these attacks against Ukraine, and that was before Sunday's audacious blow against Russia's strategic bomber fleet carried out by Ukraine's security services. So the question is, how will Russia respond to these attacks, and how will these attacks change, if any way, the talks that are supposed to take place in Istanbul on Monday? It's Oz Kataji reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz will fly to Washington next week to meet U.S. President Donald Trump.
It will be Merz's first trip to the US since taking office at the start of last month. The meeting comes amid tensions between Europe and the US over Russia's war in Ukraine and America's imposition of trade tariffs. Merz's office said he will meet Trump at the White House on Thursday in the first in-person meeting between the two. Officials said discussions will cover issues such as Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the situation in the Middle East, and trade policy.
Widespread flooding in Romania has forced hundreds to flee their homes and is threatening one of Europe's largest salt reserves. The natural disaster poses the first major test for the newly elected president, Nicu Șordan. John Todd reports.
Romania's newly elected president meets residents whose lives have been turned upside down by floods. Nicu Șordan's been in office less than a week and is witnessing some of the worst flooding in the country's central region for years. Dan said in this area and others, authorities had not implemented vital flood protection programs, promising to change that.
We had some dam construction programs which were not implemented. We have to implement these systematically so we can solve the problems systematically.
Central region saw up to 3 months of rain in just a few days, forcing some 400 residents to flee their homes. In Prague, there are concerns the floods could destroy one of Europe's largest salt mines, threatening its galleries, chapel and medical facility, which attract 500,000 visitors a year, providing vital jobs and income for the community.
The disaster is about to begin. If the galleries collapse, it'll affect the entire village area.
The new president promised action here too.
I will ask the Prime Minister to send the investigative body to establish who is to blame. The question is whether the entire salt mine can be saved, or only the above part of it.
Experts highlight that the former mayor of Bucharest faces a number of significant challenges.
All the problems that were hidden last electoral year in 2024, that mean economical, social and also political troubles, now are popping up once again on the Romanian scene.
So inflation is one of the highest, if not still the highest in the European Union. That came with the erosion of the purchasing power of Romanians.
As the flood victims begin the task of cleaning up, they'll be looking to Romania's new leader to help protect them in the future. John Todd for TVP World.
In Hungary, demonstrators took to the streets of Budapest on Sunday with their mouths taped shut to protest against a proposed bill targeting foreign-funded NGOs and media. It's estimated around 1,000 people took part in the silent march across the city's Liberty Bridge. Many participants were seen taping up their mouths to show their opposition to the proposed new law, which critics say is aimed at silencing government dissent. The legislation is expected to be voted on by June 10th. It lists entities that receive foreign funding and could curb or even close them if government officials rule they threaten Hungary and its culture. And voting has finished in this weekend's second round of local elections in Croatia. Around 5,000 polling stations across the country opened their doors at 5 a.m. for a second day of voting. Polls were held in 405 cities and municipalities in mayoral and local government races. Experts said that many Croatians have taken advantage of an extended weekend, which may lead to lower voter turnout. And now for some news from the world of sports. In tennis, Poland's Iga Świątek mounted a thrilling comeback at the French Open after dropping 8 of the first 9 games against 12-seeded Elena Rybakina.
The 24-year-old put together a 1-6, 6-3, 7-5 victory to extend her bid for a record 4th consecutive championship at Roland Garros. The big-serving, hard-hitting Rybakina, who won Wimbledon in 2022, got off to a stunning start, leading 5-0 after less than 20 minutes and grabbing 24 of the initial 32 points. But in the second set, Świątek recovered and appeared unstoppable on the red clay, powering on to reach a 6th straight quarter-final in Paris.
And that's a wrap from me for now, and I'll be handing it back over to my colleagues at the table.
Thank you so much. Those were the latest headlines with Alex Czerwiński. Alex, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Alex. Well, what a last hour. Just an hour ago, we found out those exit poll results that it was too close to call. Marcin, we've talked a little bit in this last hour about Ukraine, but of course Ukraine, Kyiv is right on our doorstep. I want to put you 2 quotes from the campaign. One from Karol Nawrocki saying, talking about Ukraine joining NATO now is pointless. The process takes years and Ukraine is not ready. We need to protect Polish interests first. That's Karol Nawrocki. Rafał Trzaskowski says, I'd rather see Putin stopped in Ukraine than in Poland. I support Ukraine's NATO bid because a free Ukraine is a safer Poland and a stronger Europe. Here we have razor-tight results, but when it comes to Ukraine, which is so crucial for Poland and the region, 2 extremely divergent perspectives.
So this is a real break from the tradition of Polish foreign policy in the pronouncements of Mr. Nawrocki.
It's an end of cross-party consensus.
It's the end of the cross-party consensus. It's the end of the consensus when it comes to Ukraine, perspective of Russia, and the overall way of running Eastern policy. Whether the presidents were like Aleksander Kwaśniewski, who came from the ex-Communist Party, or they were centrists like Bronisław Komorowski, or they were of Law and Justice, like Lech Kaczyński, the brother of the current president of Law and Justice, and the outgoing president Andrzej Duda, they were all pro-Ukrainian. And they were all supporting Ukraine's anchorage, closer relationship with the West, with the EU and NATO. And here we have a man, Mr. Nawrocki, who is actually signing up to the far-right declaration saying, I would object to Ukraine's NATO membership. So that's, and shockingly, this is not meeting with some kind of outcries from the patriotic Law and Justice Party. I mean, they let him get away with it, and that suggests that we are probably entering the end of a consensus in Polish foreign policy.
49.7% of people voted for that.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we're speaking about Ukraine, we're speaking about the potential next president of Poland, but this election must have been very closely watched by Russia as well, and by the Kremlin, because as we were approaching the presidential election, we spoke here on TVP World a lot about, for example, hybrid warfare tactics and possible mingling with the results of the election. What do you think, Marcin, is the current mood in Moscow right now?
Well, they probably, just like us, they are thinking it's too close to call. But I have no doubt that they would prefer a candidate who is keeping Poland more isolated, who is keeping Poland less engaged in the EU, less influential, more in quarrel with the neighbors, and anti-Ukrainian. So, in other words, I can't imagine that Russia would be cheering for Mr. Trzaskowski to win this election.
It will be very interesting to see how the next few days, the next 24 hours play out. I'm told we now have some sound bites from the speeches of Karol Nawrocki and Rafał Trzaskowski earlier tonight. Both, of course, in some ways claimed victory. Rafał Trzaskowski claiming victory, Karol Nawrocki saying he will win this election. Let's take a look at some of the highlights.
We have won. Although I believe the phrase razor thin will now be forever part of the Polish language and Polish politics. Because just as I said from the very beginning, from the moment we launched the pre-campaign and throughout the entire election campaign, I told you it would be very close, that every single vote would count. And above all, I want to thank every Polish woman and every Polish man who cast their vote for me and everyone who took part in this election. A heartfelt, enormous thank you to all of you.
Zwyciężymy i ocalimy Polskę.
We will win and we will save Poland. We will not allow the rule of Donald Tusk to be sealed, nor will we allow the monopoly of bad governance, a government that neglects public finances, a government that robs us of our great dreams and our aspirations to take hold. And to prevent that monopoly from closing in the night, we must win, and we know that we will. This is a unique election, the only one of its kind since 1989. And that's why I want to thank you all. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you deeply.
So Marcin, again talking about the relationship with other major centres, particularly across Europe. We've talked about Brussels, we've talked about Washington over the Atlantic, we've even talked about London and Kyiv. But Berlin, what does, for example, a Nawrocki win mean for relations with Germany and likewise for Trzaskowski?
Again, this is a rather clear difference here with Rafał Trzaskowski wanting to have Poland engaged more in the EU and to become one of the nations who is actually amongst the club of most influential members of the EU, and that requires good relationship with Germany. That cannot happen without good relationship with Poland's biggest trade partner by far. And Mr. Nawrocki clearly plays on anti-German sentiments. Whenever there was some kind of attack on him in press, he would very quickly point it out, it's the German press, it's the German-owned press, it's all the Germans that want to get me. So again, like Mr. Duda, the outgoing president, he wasn't free from anti-German sentiments, but he was kind of going middle way around it. Yeah, he did manage to have good relationship with the German president Steinmeier, for example. And I think that Mr. Nawrocki will be more radical, but Mr. Nawrocki is squarely anti-German.
There were obviously concerns on both parts. We had concerns about having a president that belongs to the same political front as the ruling party, and there were concerns about having a president that is going to be completely opposite. What is your opinion on possible scenarios that could play out within the next 24 hours and how both of these candidates could actually work with the current Polish government?
Well, I think if we have Mr. Trzaskowski winning this election, if the exit polls are being confirmed, we basically are going to have an unsplit executive able to carry out the promises that it won the election on those promises in 2023. Yeah? If they don't carry it out, if they don't deliver, then people will no longer vote for them. If Mr. Nawrocki wins, he will be continuing to do what Mr. Duda does, meaning standing in the way of these promises to be carried out, but more decisively and more disruptively, I would say even. So we would have a paralysis of the executive. And I think that we are nearing the point in which actually constitutional reform in Poland is needed. But the system in which we have a split executive is not working. And we should be having actually the government and the president from the aligned forces. Just what happened in France.
Let's touch on the governing coalition, because it is a coalition, and from my understanding it's a coalition of a number of parties, the most in some time that Poland has had. So will a Trzaskowski win really unlock all of the coalition's promises and all of the measures and ideas that it has had in place since 2023 that it has wanted to push through, but says it can't because of President Duda, law and justice ally? Will it really unlock the full agenda? And on the flip side, scenario building here, could a Nawrocki win lead to a coalition collapse and indeed a snap election?
I think that Nawrocki's win, if he was to win, I'm sorry, if Nawrocki was to win, I think that yes, indeed, we could face a coalition crisis and probably the collapse of the government. Maybe not immediately, but within a certain space of time. If Mr. Trzaskowski is to win, then yes, indeed, the reform agenda will be unlocked. Even though, as you just mentioned yourself, this is a coalition government, and within this coalition government, we have a certain parties and individuals who object to progressive agenda. So not everybody in this government is there together with Rafał Trzaskowski on that. But if he was to win, I think there will be a certain momentum out there, which will be pushing the coalition parties to basically delivering.
Just to close things off, we know that the next president, according to information which we provided on the program before, is going to be sworn in office on the 6th of August of this year. What do you think for both of these candidates, depending on who's going to win? What is going to be the first thing that they're going to focus on, and what's going to be the priority?
Well, if it's Mr. Trzaskowski winning, if the exit polls are being confirmed, when it comes to the issues of foreign policy, I'm pretty sure that he would want to take some kind of ownership of the European agenda. I think that is something which he will want to sooner or later he will want to take under his wing, which may actually produce some kind of problems for the coalition. In other areas, I think it's the abortion law. I think it's the civil unions. And I think it's also some economic measures regarding the income-free amount of money.
And that is all for our special coverage here of the 2025 Polish presidential election. Remember, we are projecting 129,000 votes, roughly, are in it. So watch this space over the coming days.
Definitely another 24 hours. We will be reporting more on the latest results, the late poll, and we're going to find out who's going to be the next president of Poland. Most likely tomorrow. It's going to be a very long night for all of us here, but thank you so much for joining. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska, Chief Political Correspondent, my co-host Aaron Dahmen, and Europe editor Marcin Zaborowski were here in the studio with us. Thank you so much and have a very good night.
Good evening.
We have won. From the moment we launched the pre-campaign and throughout the entire election campaign, I told you it would be very close, that every single vote would count. And above all, I want to thank every Polish woman and every Polish man who cast their vote for me and everyone who took part in this election. A heartfelt, enormous thank you to all of you.
We will win and we will save Poland. We will not allow the rule of Donald Tusk to be sealed, nor will we allow the monopoly of bad governance. A government that neglects public finances, a government that robs us of our great dreams and our aspirations to take hold. And to prevent that monopoly from closing in the night, we must win, and we know that we will. This is a unique election, the only one of its kind since 1989. And that's why I want to thank you all. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you deeply.